You were sure right about that brass company, Ron Forrester said to his wife Jane as she came in the door and stepped carefully around the stacks of files that dotted the floor in their office. Actually, he spoke to his wife's back. She was on her hands and knees lifting the entire contents of a file cabinet drawer and turning it into yet another stack. Forrester Investigators Limited was planning to renovate. Was I? Good. Watch out for the coffee pot. What did you find exactly? Hand me the little vacuum there. Please, is the company as big as we thought? Jane's concentration was on the case was obviously broken by the demands of the renovations. Ron lifted the empty coffee pot off the seat of a former dining room chair and sat down gingerly. What do you want first, the vacuum or the information? Jane knelt, upright, arched her back, and sighed. You're right, she said. We better concentrate on this assignment, or we'll never be able to afford the interior decorator. She studied her husband's face for a moment. Do you really think vertical slat blinds are a good idea? I think they're so cold, and we spend so much time here, so. She stopped abruptly, and then waved hesitantly at all the stacks of papers and files and books. Sorry, you can see where my head has been the last hour or two. To be honest, I haven't given a single second of everything to Everything Brass Incorporated. What did you find? She walked on her knees to Ron's chair. Shift, she said as she smiled at him. Ron moved over so the two of them could squeeze onto the little chair. He took a single sheet of paper out of his briefcase. You were right about Everything Brass Incorporated, he said. They do make all kinds of little brass stuff all right. Ornaments, house letters, small lamps. And they've got quite the custom line, too. For the horsey set, mostly harness strappings and customized fittings for carriages, stuff like that. Jane frowned slightly. Shouldn't you be using the past tense? Or do they have another manufacturing plant we don't know about? Everything Brass Incorporated had burned to the ground in a spectacular conflagration only about 3 weeks before. The Foresters had been retained by the insurers, Highland Park Fire and Accident Ltd., to look into the causes of the blaze and to evaluate the validity of the claim entered by Everything Brass. No, Ron said. As near as I can tell so far, the owners have no other property associated with the company. And you're right. Maybe I should say did instead of do. There's no way anything brass is going to come out of this site for a long time. It was one heck of a blaze. Then what have you got? Jane wanted to know. Enough to suggest we should look a little deeper into the background of Preston Wendell, Ron replied. Jane fixed her gaze at a spot on the window framing from which the vertical slat blinds might hang. Wendell, she said. That's the two-thirds owner. Indeed, Ron answered. And the designer, foreman, chief. Metallurgist, Top Gun salesman, PR man, everything. The other one-third is owned by his late father-in-law's estate. So what is it you've got? Jane shifted a little and gained a bit more territory on the chair. Well, that figure there. He held up the sheet of paper and pointed to a circled number. The $400,000, that's their gross income for the past 12 months. So? That's not out of line for a business like theirs. But compare that to this, Ron said. He pointed at another figure, $900,000. That is what Everything Brass is claiming in inventory loss in the fire. Now tell me, how does a company survive when its inventory in the plant is more than double the annual sales? As far as I'm concerned, it just doesn't make sense. Then you think there's something shady about Preston Wendell? Jane shifted her gaze now to the other end of the window frame. She was beginning to convince herself that vertical slat blinds were definitely out of the question. Ron broke her stare with a piece of paper. I'm almost positive, but the guy is so clean. He didn't try to hide, even a little bit, that the fire was his fault. He was as upfront as could be with the police, and it sure seemed like an accident. Heaven knows his own burns are bad enough. Naphtha, Jane interrupted. He was cleaning an antique set of brass ham knobs, wasn't he? For a set of tandem harness? Ron nodded. And he was dipping the hams right into the drum of naphtha, Jane went on. Ron nodded again. Right. Now, I'll grant you that that's an incredibly stupid thing to do, but it's not dishonest. Highland Park may be able to contest this claim because he broke fire regulations. I'm not sure. I don't think you're allowed to open a drum of naphtha like that. I'm not even sure it can be done. He paused. But he hasn't tried to deny what he was doing. He was perfectly straight about the sparks, too. He accidentally bangs the hang knobs together over the drum. This makes sparks. Poof go the naphtha fumes. Naphtha fumes, sorry. Down goes everything Brass Incorporated, and almost takes Preston Wendell along, too. Again, it was really stupid, but hardly dishonest. Jane stood up. On the contrary, she said, if Highland Park pays the claim on the very basis of that story, we'll be out of business. By the way, the vertical slat blinds are completely wrong for this window. This time, I'm sure. So the question I will ask in just a minute is, what is the flaw in Preston Wendell's story that Jane Forrester has noticed?